Good morning, everybody. There are a few cars that are iconic. One is the Volkswagen Beetle, but another is the one that came after it, the Volkswagen van or bus or minibus, and it came out on this date, March the 8th in 1950. Here's the Model T in production from 1908 to 1927. Hitler was really impressed with the Model T and wanted something for the Germans. So here's Dr. Ferdinand Porsche. He was born in Bohemia, which was part of Austria-Hungary back then. Showed an early interest in electrical things and mechanical stuff. He joined various design firms as he got older, and he designed this car, for instance, which was partly an electric car. And eventually he went to work for Austro-Daimler, becomes Mercedes-Benz later. But when the Great Depression came, he had to quit and started his own design firm eventually. Now here's Hitler becoming Chancellor, Hitler on the left, Hindenburg on the right. And one of the goals the Nazis had for Germany was to get it out of the Great Depression. And at the German Auto Show of 1933, pictured here, Hitler announced that they were going to build a people's car for everybody, kind of like a Model T. And Volkswagen is the German word for people's car. So on the left is Dr. Porsche pointing out the model of the Volkswagen to Hitler and other Nazis. And the idea was that German citizens would subscribe, so they'd send in money, and when their car came off the assembly line, they'd get it. But there were legal problems. This is the Tetra V570, and this company actually sued Volkswagen for infringement of its design type, and eventually Volkswagen paid them. So here's a poster from the 1930s encouraging the Germans to put in their money for a Beetle. This was known as the Type 1. Our event, the van, is going to be known as the Type 2. And coincidental with this was the building of the Autobahn, an interstate in Germany pictured here. So this idea that everybody can get a car and everybody can drive on these limited access highways was a big deal. But the war came, Volkswagens weren't really built, and it's not until after the war that the assembly lines get going. And here's a picture from 1945. There was an importer in Holland, in the Netherlands, who said, wouldn't it be great to get a van? And this is the background to our event. Here's the Type 2, the van, March 8, 1950. And there were a couple things about it that were quite unique. One is that it had a rear engine, so the driver sat above the axle, basically. Now, there had been concept cars like this one, the Rumpler Tropfenwagen. Many weren't built, but this was a design idea from the 30s. And this one, the Dymaxion, by Buckminster Fuller, which again was a concept car. So when the Type 2 came out, the van pictured here, there were basically two models. There was the Combi, in which you could take out the seats yourself, and then there was a commercial, and they made about 9,000 that first year, in 1950. Now in 1963, Bob Dylan came out with his second album, and if you look on the left, you see a VW van. The next year, in 1964, a group called the Merry Pranksters took a school bus and drove all over the country handing out drugs and doing countercultural things. So this idea of a bus is starting to be associated with the counterculture. 1967, The Who came out with a song called Magic Bus, building on this theme of the bus as part of the counterculture. And the same year, the Beatles came out with a movie and an album called Magical Mystery Tour. And guess what they do? They ride around on a bus. The penultimate event of the hippie era probably is the Woodstock concert here, 1969, in New York State. And if you look at the photographs from that, they're all over the place. But in many of them, you see the hippie group with their VW bus. They had other names too. They were called the microbus, the mini van, but they were certainly part of that era. So here we are with the Beetle and the van, Type 1 and Type 2, out of Germany at the end of World War II.